Hey guys, so I locked down Blue Collar and Scholar. Next episode is going to be Tuesday, next Tuesday, the 18th. We're going to record it at 5 p.m. We'll go an hour, and then I'll upload it to YouTube. So put it on your schedule. It should be uploaded by 7 o'clock if all goes well. And this is going to be really, really interesting. I really have some questions that I want answered, and I think you'll find it very interesting. St. Paul and St. Luke were scholars of their day. St. Peter and St. John were blue-collar guys. So Team Jesus has always had a mix of blue-collars and scholars. So this is nothing new, but it is very exciting. If you follow me, it's not hard to hide my passions. I'm very passionate about politics and about religion. And I've read the scholars my whole life, never had the opportunity. Well, I had the opportunity. I blew it because of choices. We live in America. We all have opportunity to go to college if you really want to. We make excuses. I'm not making any excuses. I've made some bad choices, but I went into the military and I have no regrets about my 4 years of service in the Navy. So anyhow, I've always read the scholars, political guys. I used to love to read the late William F. Buckley, although he's not a doctor, he's very intellectual. I think you could rate him as a scholar. I don't know what the technical term is, but really smart conservative thinker back in the day. Charles Krautheimer, another one comes to mind. He was definitely a scholar. Dr. Charles Krautheimer. I think he got his PhD from Oxford or something, if I recall. He passed away a few years ago. Amazing man. And then the living scholars, there's no doubt that Dr. Alan Keyes is a political scholar. Robert P. George, not only is a political scholar, he's also a legal scholar. And for Victor Davis Hanson, another great scholar of today. I listen to him read his columns. But what's amazing is God is so amazing that when I got this idea of having, episodes blue collar and a scholar, I reached out to some scholars, and people were kind of my wife was like, don't be disappointed, if these guys say no. And I'm like, yeah, if it's God's will. And surprisingly, I had some really impressive scholars say yes and come on my show. And if there's on the political side, I also have biblical scholars. I'm going to get to that in a minute. But if there was a political dream team, if you remember the first Olympics, I remember it like it was yesterday. We allowed the pros to play. And I remember, watching Olympics when I was a kid. My dad said, if they let our pros play, we would dominate the world. And I remember saying, Dad, they're letting the pros play. And he was like, no way. And we had that dream team basketball team. And I would say all my, the political scholars I had that I just mentioned would definitely make that team if it was basketball, if you wanted to pick a dream team. And of course, there's no doubt the GOAT, greatest of all time, was Michael Jordan. And but even if you weren't Michael Jordan, if you were on that team, you were the best of the best in the world. These were the best players in the world. And by the grace of God, somehow he allowed me to interview two of the GOATs on the intellectual side. And either one could be argued, the GOAT rather. Both of them were on the dream team of conservative intellectual thinkers, Robert P. George and Dr. Alan Keyes. You could argue Robert P. George is not only a political scholar, he's a legal scholar. And then you can say, okay, well, Alan Keyes is a political scholar, but he actually worked in the Reagan White House, ran for president. So he really, he knows a lot about politics. So there would be a toss-up for the GOAT on the political scholar spectrum. And by the grace of God, we got to interview him, I say we because without you guys subscribing, I'd have nothing to, I'd have no platform to talk to these guys. And when you guys, asking me great questions that I put forward to them. So this scholar that I'm going to have Tuesday night, I think he could rival Dr. Keyes and Robert P. George as the GOAT of that political dream team. But listen, don't turn me off if you don't like politics, because when it comes to biblical scholars, this guy's on the dream team as well. As far as biblical scholars, you could argue Dr. Scott Hahn is the Michael Jordan. And by the grace of God, he humbly accepted an invitation and we've interviewed him. And, but if I were to have them make a choice, if someone put a gun to my head and said, you got to tell me who the Michael Jordan of biblical scholars are, I would have to say this guy on Tuesday that I'm interviewing is. And that's not saying anything less as Dr. Scott Hahn. I got more books by Dr. Scott Hahn than any other author. And I was like kind of, starstruck when he was on my show. My intro went on way too long, so I was telling him how much I loved him and showing him all the books of his that I've read and studied. So I love Dr. Scott Hahn. It's not taking anything away from him. But if you're talking about biblical scholars, if you look at their credentials, this guy got on Tuesday. I can't think of anyone who would be like the GOAT besides him of biblical scholars. It's going to be really exciting. I got some theological questions I'm going to ask. And what's cool is, like I said, he's a political scholar as well. And he's also a legal scholar like Robert P. George, political and legal. And he's a biblical. So he's crossover in 3 areas. And like I always say, this all connects. Everything connects. You just seen, the Supreme Court has, just made a big decision. They're going to be making another big decision. The law, politics, and religion, it all intersects. It's hard to separate it, So that's why, I talk about them all. Even though this is primarily a Catholic apologetics channel. That's what I created this channel to be. To save souls and to bring evangelicals back to the one true church, the Catholic Church. And this guy, Tuesday night, is going to have some arguments. So if you're an evangelical, you need to tune in and get your Bible out, get your pen and paper out, and take some notes. If you got any questions, put them in the comment. We pretty much got what we're going to talk about down, but, if you give me a good enough questions, I'll throw it at them. And if you guess, I promise, if you guess who this scholar is, I'll ask. You can put in the comments your question, and I'll ask them. Or you can email me if you prefer that, bluecollarcatholic@gmail. So I'm real excited about Blue Collar and a Scholar on Tuesday night. So I've given you a lot of hints. So I'm not going to give you any more hints. So give me your best guess and stay Catholic.